Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, my name is Putri Salsa Bila dari Syifa. I'm a student at Pancasakti University, Bekasi. My major is English Education. I want to qualify my final exam from my lecturer, Miss Tiara, Dian, Sari, M.Pd with courses language testing. In this video, I will explain about assessing speaking skill. Okay, let's take a look. Speaking skill. Definition of speaking. Speaking is the real-time, productive, oral or oral skill. It is real-time because the other interlocutor is waiting for the speaker to speak right then, and the speaker cannot revise his response as he might do in writing. Levels of speaking. From the highest to its lowest level, speaking can be dissected into text, utterance, clause, phrase, word, morpheme, and phoneme. Types of spoken language. Spoken language can be in the form of monologue or dialogue. Micro and macro skills of speaking. Brown suggests a list of micro and macro skills of speaking to help determine test maker as what who assess whether to assess on smaller chunk of language or speaking's larger elements. Challenges in assessing speaking. Much in the same tone, Brown describes two major challenges in assessing speaking. First, the interaction of listening and speaking. The use of much clarification can make it difficult to trade speaking apart. Second, the speaker's strategy to dodge certain form to convey meaning may make it difficult for test makers to design a solid elicitation technique, one that can result in the expected target form. Basic types of speaking assessment tests. Imitative. Repeating a small stretch of language and focused on pronunciation. Test maker considers using this type of assessment if he is not interested in test taker's competence in understanding and conveying meaning or in getting involved in interactive conversation. The competence assessed is that of purely phonetic, prosodic, lexical, and grammatical pronunciation. Intensive. First, reading load. Eaton and Hodges maintains that the use of reading load may not be appropriate because of the difference in processing written input from that of spoken one. Second, directed responses. Respond to recorded speech. One of the most popular tests of speaking for its practicality and mass lab use, despite its mechanical and non-communicative nature, GRT is beneficial to elicit a specific grammatical form or a transformation of a sentence which requires minimal processing. Micro skills 1 until 5, age and 10. 3. Sentence or dialogue completion. Hidden warns us the fact that this type may provide a logical flow of conversation given that the sentence or dialogue completion is done in lab, which is what normally administered. Therefore, this type will probably be beneficial only for assessing test takers' micro skill of providing the right chunks of language and other pronunciation features. Fourth, translation. Up to single sentence level interpreting game. Interpreting, as Hodges describes, might involve the test proctor acting as native speaker of test taker's first language and the test taker interpreting the utterance into English. 5. Limited picture code tests, including simple sequence. Pictures are mostly convenient to elicit description, Hodges. In addition to describing comparison, order of events, positions, and location, a more detailed picture might be used to elicit test makers' competence in telling a plan, direction, and even opinions. Responsive question and answer. Question at the responsive level tend to be referential, as opposed to intensive display question. Brown, a referential question requires that takers to produce meaningful language and response. Such question might require an open-ended response or a counter question directed to the interviewer, giving instruction and direction. In this type of test takers are elicit their performance in describing a how-to description. A 5 to 6 sentence response may be sufficient to be required either from an impromptu question or a minute planning prior to the instruction. Paraphrasing. Oral paraphrasing can have written or oral input, with the latter being more preferable. A paraphrase as a speaking assessment should be conducted with caution because test takers' competence might be mistakenly judged by their short-term memory and listening comprehension instead of their speaking production. Interactive. Larger dialogues on transactional and interactional conversation. Interview. Interview can be face-to-face, one-on-one, or two-on-one, each with its advantage and disadvantage. Drama-like test. Only divides drama-like test into three subtypes: improvisation, role-play, and simulation. Discussion and conversation. Discussion and conversation provide somewhat similar difficulties in terms of predictability of the response, hence consistency of the scoring to that of interview and drama-like tests. Games. It is nearly impossible to list all games, but virtually all games that can elicit spoken language objectively can be used as informal assessment for speaking. Scoring rubric. An effective assessment should follow this rule: specific criteria, appropriate tests, elicitation of optimal output, practical and reliable scoring procedures. Only suggest several steps in developing rubric. Set criteria of test success, set dimension of language to assess, give appropriate weight to each dimension, focus of what test taker can do instead of what they can't. Conclusion. The key of assessing speaking skill is understanding the continuum of spoken language, test types, and scoring rubric. This knowledge separation between one level of competence and another requires time and effort in specifying the criteria of speaking, thus to elicit particular behavior, and in developing practically representative scoring rubric. The variety of test types will help test maker to decide which one is appropriate for the wide array of the continuum of this particular skill. Okay, maybe that's all that I can explain. Thanks for your attention and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.